So get this. Deputy White House counsel and lifelong friend of Bill and Hillary Clinton, Vincent Walker Foster, was found dead in a park with a gunshot wound to the head. After initial investigations, it was ruled a suicide. After multiple investigations and ones currently still ongoing, there is an air of mystery, conspiracy, and questions surrounding the Clintons' involvement in Vincent Foster's death. And today we are going to look into the incredibly long line of connections and suspicions that surrounded the life and, of course, death of Vincent Foster. And I want to thank you for being here on the Black Raven Report. This is the Clinton Blacklist. Born January 15th, 1945 in Hope, Arkansas, Vincent made friends with a younger boy at the time who was not as well off by most of our standards, but he was still very rich. He was upper middle class, Audi, not Bugatti, yet, at least. And that boy being Bill Clinton. He would later go on to state that Vince was always kind to him and never lorded his wealth and power and status over him like the older boys did. And Bill latched on to Vince throughout their formative, educative years. But Bill always had his eyes set on wealth and power. But that's enough about Bill for right now. And let's get back on track. While Mr. Foster was attending Hope High School in Arkansas, he was the head of the student council, with Clinton's future chief of staff, Mac McClarty. In 1967, Foster would attend Davidson College in Arkansas, and he would graduate with a degree in psychology. Though his father, a very wealthy real estate businessman, would want him to follow in his footsteps, Foster had other ideas. He would first decide to study at the Vanderbilt University of Law School, but when the Vietnam War was getting ready to kick off, he was a Creedence Clearwater Revival's fortunate son and was able to enlist in the National Guard of Arkansas to avoid the draft. And this would cause him to have to transfer to be closer to his new post in the National Guard. And now he would be transferring to the University of Arkansas Law School in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where he would graduate with honors #1 of his class of 46. In 1971, Foster would join the Rose Law Firm based out of Little Rock, Arkansas, where he would make partner in 1974 after fulfilling his enlistment with the National Guard. It was around this time Foster was heading the Arkansas Bar Association Committee, which was tasked at the responsibility of overseeing legal aid. It was at this time that Foster would come into contact with a legal aid clinic worker, Hillary Clinton. Foster would go on to jumpstart Hillary's law career when he would hire her to the Rose Law Firm, where she would go on to become the first female partner at that law firm. Now, this hiring did just happen to occur shortly after Bill Clinton had become governor. Could have been a little quid pro quo type thing going on. It was at this time that he had moved from Fayetteville to Little Rock. After enjoying almost 20 years of running a successful business in law, Mr. Foster was now one of Bill's personal lawyers. And in 1992, he would go on to work for the Clintons' presidential transition team. Foster would go on to join the White House staff and assume his role as Deputy White House counsel in 1993. Despite Foster's highly successful law career, he suffered greatly in political law and in politics. He would initially be responsible for vetting administration appointees, and this wouldn't go too well for him. One of the subjects being vetted was quoted saying, "I wondered why I was being interviewed by the guy who is to be the Deputy White House counsel." This role would go on to fill him with anxiety. He blamed himself for the Zoe Baird nomination and for her scandal for basically owning slaves. While not technically owning slaves, what she did was she purchased 2 illegal immigrant women from Peru to nanny and chauffeur their children. And basically they would be deported if they didn't comply. And of course, like all politicians who get caught, they don't pay their taxes. This is another one who didn't pay their taxes. Then he had to resign from his country club after word got out that it was a all whites only membership. And Bill Clinton was once quoted saying this about the country club: "I still get a thrill when I look back at that downtown Little Rock from my perch on the hill. Our founders picked a magical site, and I did not have sexual relations with that woman." And yes, I am aware that was a terrible Bill Clinton impression. As well as the previously listed responsibilities Mr. Foster had to the Clintons, as deputy counsel, Foster had many responsibilities to the Clintons, working on their financial documents to place their financial holdings into a blind trust, as well as the Castle Grand paperwork, as well as Whitewater tax paperwork, which will be discussed later in the Whitewater scandal. He also was responsible for their Madison Guarantee, which was a savings and loan association based out of Little Rock, Arkansas, that was owned by a friend of Bill and Hillary Clinton. His name was Jim McDougal, in which Bill and Hillary Clinton were business partners with. When this bank was shut down by federal regulators, the bank had assets holding up to $125.5 million and was the subject of investigations by Congress to determine if McDougal was diverting money from the bank to the Clinton campaign and Whitewater. And on February 25th, 1994, George Stephanopoulos and Harold Ikes tried to convince Roger Altman to stop the hiring of Jay Stevens, who at the time was heading the investigation into the banks. Finally, it seems to be the final controversy that broke the camel's back. In May 1993, Travelgate started, and the White House Travel Office controversy, which saw 7 White House Travel Office employees get fired. These employees seem to have been fired to hire a contract company that was owned by a close friend of the Clintons, Harry Thomason, a Hollywood producer. The Clintons would hire this travel company based out of Little Rock, Arkansas. This company and Harry would help the Clintons by giving them kickbacks on federal airplane audit contracts worth $500,000, and as well as seeking travel office charter business contracts. This money would then be given as kickbacks in a percentage back to the Clintons to help fund their campaigns. In a 1993 memo written for McClarty, it was said that Foster would regularly inform me that Hillary Clinton was concerned that her desired actions were not taking place, and that desired action was to fire the travel office staff. He would go on to say in a quote that we both know there would be hell to pay if we failed to take swift and decisive action in conformity with Hillary's wishes. That sounds like a tyrant. With all the failures surrounding Mr. Foster and the Clintons, and the exposure the Clintons were getting from all of this, there was beginning to become a fury building inside of Hillary. Mr. Foster was obviously worn out with Hillary at this time, as he had kept notes in his journal to avoid the sole blame for any wrongdoing. He chronicled his Travelgate meeting with Hillary and her impatience with him not killing the story. Foster told just a few weeks before he had died, "I have never worked so hard in my life, and the wind blows hardest at the top." In 6 short months of the Clintons assuming office, all of the controversies and corruptions surrounding the Clintons' reign, Mr. Foster was seen physically and mentally worn down, shouting at his boss, the Clintons, and talking about resigning. On May 8th, 1993, Foster gave the commencement address at the University of Arkansas Law School, his alma mater, and said, "The reputation you develop for intellectual and ethical integrity will be your greatest asset or your worst enemy. You will be judged by your judgment. Treat every pleading, every brief, every contract, every letter, every daily task as if your career will be judged on it. There is no victory, no advantage, no fee, no favor, which is worth even a blemish of your reputation for intellect and integrity. Dents to the reputation in the legal profession are irreparable." On July 20th, 1993, Vince Foster was found dead of a gunshot wound to the head in Fort Marcy Park, Virginia. He was 48 years old. U.S. Park Police noted that Foster was holding a .38 caliber revolver, and there was no blood spray on the hands and no fingerprints on the gun, but it was initially ruled a suicide. Later, Senator D'Amato said this about the case: "If indeed Vince Foster committed suicide and put the gun in his mouth, it's impossible for that gun to have been found in his hand. After the discharge, there would have been a kickback and the gun would have jumped out. Yet here it is in his hand." It was at this time that more questionable behavior started happening around the information involving the death of Mr. Foster. On the morning of July 22nd, 1993, Hillary Clinton called her close friend, Susan Thomas. This was 1 minute before Thomas paged the White House Chief of Staff lawyer, Bernard Nussbaum to discuss access to Foster's documents that were in his office. White House counsel lawyer Bernard Nussbaum obstructed both the Justice Department's investigation and Park Department's investigation into Vince Foster's death by refusing to hand over documents found in Foster's briefcase. Hillary also called the Chief of Staff, Margaret Williams, 20 minutes before the search of Foster's office. Following Mr. Foster's death, upon his office being cleared out by White House staff, a suicide note and a resignation letter was found in a briefcase torn into 27 pieces. Several investigations have taken place over the years covering the Whitewater scandal and Foster's death. The first investigator involved in the Whitewater crimes was Mr. Starr, and he had followed Mr. Foster's path all the way through up until his death. Following Mr. Foster's death, though, investigator Mr. Fisk had taken over and ruled that his death had nothing to do with Whitewater and was a suicide. Following Mr. Fisk's investigation, the FBI reassigned Kenneth Starr back onto the case, after deeming that Mr. Fisk's investigation was poorly done. A 3-year-long investigation into the death of Mr. Foster was still ongoing by then Whitewater investigator Kenneth Starr. During this investigation, numerous people were interviewed involving Mr. Foster's death. The list is as follows: Bill and Hillary Clinton, Thomas McClarty, Bruce Lindsay, John Podesta, Ricky Seidman, George Stephanopoulos, Charles Burton, Marcia Scott, Roy Neal, Margaret Williams, Bernard Nussbaum, William Kennedy, Stephen Neuwirth, Beth Nolan, and Clifford Solon. After interviews and analysis of crime scene evidence, the investigation was closed and it was ruled again a suicide. Though some answers are given, the FBI never did find blood on the gun. No one heard the shot, meaning he could have been killed elsewhere and then dropped at the park. No bullet was ever recovered. There was no dirt on his shoes. There were no burns in his mouth from the firing. There was no gunpowder on his face. Their conclusion states that the overwhelming weight of the evidence compels the conclusion that Vincent Foster committed suicide. Though I don't accept that answer, just due to all the suspicion and all the missing stuff. For unknown reasons, Mr. Starr elected to conceal the FBI's findings in his final report. Over the years of investigations into Vince Foster's death and the connections to the Whitewater scandal, they accumulated 7.5 million pages of documentations. But when a Freedom of Information Act request was done, no records could be found. The National Archives were reached out to, and they confirmed that they could not locate the information requested. Among the requested information, there were more than 3,000 boxes of records amounting to 7.5 million pages generated by the Starr investigation that cannot be found. Other documents related to the Clintons have also vanished from the National Archives. In March of 2009, a Bill Clinton White House external hard drive of confidential documents disappeared, and the Inspector General's office opened a criminal investigation. But that's for another time, and I just want to make sure that people still enjoy it, so I'm just gonna make sure to cut it off right here. I could make it longer, but I don't know if this is something that you guys would be interested in, the longer form content. I'm struggling to bring it down already because it is a lot of work to do. But I like to kind of tend the 20-minute videos anyway, so this hopefully is a good enough dive into it that'll get you interested, that you want to look at it yourself. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this look into the death of Vince Foster and the web of crimes connected to the Clintons. And if you have any death connections to the Clintons you want me to look into, go ahead and leave a comment down below. Or if you just want to say hi, go ahead and leave a comment down below. I appreciate everyone being here on the Black Raven Report, and thank you for watching. Subscribe!